We're going to talk today a little bit about what happened at the NATO summit, which just ended, and of course, the lingering controversy over whether or not the uranium enrichment capabilities of Iran were destroyed. What are the implications for that, and why it is urgent that people continue to mobilize with the LaRouche organization leaflet on whether or not we will have thermonuclear fireworks on the 4th of July. It is June 27th, and this is the LaRouche organization morning update that normally Harley Schlanger does, but today it's me, Diane Sare. So first of all, they've figured out that the NATO summit this year in The Hague was very different than the one in 2024 over which Joe Biden presided. In 2024, the NATO readout was 5,300 words, and they condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine and etc. This year in The Hague, with Donald Trump as president of the United States, the NATO summit was very short, and their concluding agreement was very short, 425 words, presumably so they could have an agreement, because clearly many nations in Europe no longer want to be part of a war drive against Russia, and President Trump doesn't seem to want to either. Now, according to Responsible Statecraft, they say if the Hague summit proved one thing, it may have been that getting the European allies to spend more on defense is a bigger priority to President Trump than bringing peace to Ukraine. More focused on the conflict in the Middle East, President Trump has once again conceded the difficulty of bringing the war in Ukraine to an end, largely because Zelensky isn't ready to end the war, and because the transatlantic financial system is bankrupt. And as Lindsey Graham says, it's really great for the United States to be producing weapons, and it's cheap for us, even if 1 million Ukrainians are dead. He doesn't care. And what they say in their write-up, that is Responsible Statecraft, is, quote, "One thing is clear, U.S. defense contractors will arguably benefit the most from the Hague summit. To hit 5% of GDP, which is what Trump is demanding that other nations pay into NATO, Britain would need to increase its spending by around $114 billion per year by 2035. And Germany already has pledged to hit the 5% target 6 years early in 2029, hiking spending by $128 billion per year. And this is very important, and they seem to miss the significance, to kick off the spending spree, the UK has agreed to purchase 12 of the most modern F-35A aircraft at a cost of $700 million. The F-35A is capable of delivering U.S.-provided B-61 nuclear bombs. Okay, hold that thought. This means that the UK could launch a nuclear war without going through the United States. In other words, the United Kingdom becomes capable of starting a nuclear war on its own. Extremely dangerous, extremely alarming. Now, otherwise, at the NATO conference, President Trump made the unfortunate remark that the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were, quote unquote, necessary to bring World War II to an end, something that is a lie. Japan was already negotiating the terms of surrender before the nuclear bombs were dropped. And even if you wanted to argue that using them stopped the war, why did you need to drop 2? It's all a lie. There was a different purpose to using nuclear bombs, which is more in the order of a global dictatorship through fear of nuclear war. They didn't end the war. But what was Trump's point? Was he saying that what we just did to Iran was the equivalent of dropping the nuclear bombs and ended the conflict? One would hope that that's what he means, even though that in itself was a violation of international law. But one would hope that this would be over. Or is he threatening that nuclear weapons could be used, as Newsweek Newsweek's interviews of some retired military people implied, which is why it's become such an issue as to whether the destruction of Iran's uranium enrichment capabilities was complete or not. And there is a big difference, as former Iranian ambassador Mousavian said to Christine Amanpour at an interview on the sidelines of the NATO summit. Does the US want regime change or a nuclear deal? Many people, including Iranian experts such as Ambassador Mousavian, say that you could get a nuclear deal. Iran could agree to stop at 3.75% enrichment, which is all you need for nuclear energy, if that's what the deal is about, and the US wants to return to the negotiating table. Obviously, they're not going to agree on regime change. And if that's the issue, then Iran will be out of the non-proliferation treaty and probably do work on building a nuclear bomb, as will many other countries, because they will see that if they agree to get rid of their nuclear weapons or weapons capability or program, that they are simply going to be overthrown and destabilized. That is why this is important. Now, for his part, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who you remember when he was head of the CIA, was encouraging the idea of assassinating Julian Assange, has weighed in to say that he thought these strikes on Iran were brilliant and this is now deterrence. However, in Iran, what has now happened is that their parliament has passed a resolution to suspend any investigations by the IAEA, which is sort of an obvious move because what was bombed was not a secret program. What was bombed was a program that was under inspection of IAEA and was not in violation of any laws. So they say, if having inspections doesn't stop us from being bombed, why should we continue to have inspections? So the bill states that they will not be allowed to inspect unless there is approval from Iran's Supreme National Security Council. The head of the IAEA, Grossi, was, of course, upset by this. And the bill explicitly links the suspension of the IAEA inspections to what just happened, the bombing, as I said. And they say that they will not restate the inspections unless two conditions are met. One, full assurance that Iranian sovereignty and protection of its nuclear scientists, of whom 9 or 10 or more were assassinated by the Israelis, and facilities are protected. And two, that there is recognition of Iran's full rights under Article 4 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty to conduct uranium enrichment and nuclear development, that is, for energy within its borders. So it's possible. Will we do that? Now, on the question of New York, people will be very sorry for the Wall Street billionaires who are apparently, quote unquote, alarmed and depressed over the victory of Zoran Mamdani in the Democratic primary. And this includes Philip Lafont of Cotu Management, Bill Ackman of Pershing Square, that's the one who wants to cut off all funding to any university that allows students First Amendment rights to speak of the genocide being committed by Israel in Palestine. Lawrence Summers, of course, former Treasury Secretary, former Harvard president, who said that women cannot do mathematics, and Catherine Wild. So they are very unhappy that New Yorkers have noticed that the cost of living is out of control. And then finally, more on the healthcare crisis in America, the shutdown of hospitals all over the place. People have probably noticed this if you don't live in a major city, or if you do. For example, New York City, we just lost Mount Sinai. It was a 799-bed hospital on East 16th Street, closed because their trustees were also on the board of Goldman Sachs and they wanted the land for real estate. They are saying 300 hospitals, rural hospitals, are now facing risk of closure. But let me go back to the Iran question and why we are mobilizing, and why what Helga Zepp-LaRouche has been insisting, which is the only way that you can avoid war, is a new international security architecture. You cannot solve these problems in pairwise interaction because they're part of a larger dynamic. And what we actually need is to end the British colonial system. And the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, said as much in a meeting in Turkmenistan, where he said that global security is the most crucial issue today. He expressed that he thought that the United States was more rational under Trump than it was under Biden. That probably is true, but that doesn't mean we're behaving rationally now, in my opinion. He said that Trump seems to want to have a foreign policy which lines up with the national interest of the United States, whereas Biden was consumed by a neoliberal hegemonic agenda. And he thanked Turkmenistan for putting forward an idea of a global security initiative. He said this is compatible with Xi Jinping's initiative of 2023 and also what's been discussed by Belarus, and he welcomes all of that. So let me just say that given the circumstances around Iran, I believe the ceasefire is fragile. I think that this leaflet, which was put out last week by the LaRouche organization, which is available on the website for distribution, should be printed and circulated. We have the objective of getting 100,000 copies of this leaflet out by the 4th of July. So please join us. Please send a note to the LaRouche organization if you'd like to volunteer to distribute it. And please tune in at 11 a.m. Eastern Time this morning for the International Peace Coalition call with Helga Zepp-LaRouche.